President Trump ordering a review to defund New York City and what he calls other anarchist cities. The president sent a 5-page memo to all federal agencies to review how money can be redirected. In fact, that memo reads in part that his administration will not allow federal tax dollars to fund cities that allow themselves to deteriorate into lawless zones. The memo twice mentions Mayor Bill de Blasio by name. The memo also names Police Commissioner Dermot Shea in the disbanding of the NYPD's plainclothes crime unit. It reads, quote, police officials have cited this decision as a factor contributing to the rise in violence, end quote. Joining me now live is Police Commissioner Dermot Shea here on the Pix 11 Morning News. Commissioner, thank you for being here this morning.
Hey, Dan, thanks for having me.
So this was big from the president last night. He named you in this 5-page memo. You just heard what he had to say about disbanding the anti-crime unit. Also talked about a rise in crime. Let me get your response to the president.
Yeah, well, Dan, I mean, I look at it from this perspective. I think we can, what are we, 2 months to the election now? We can spend the next 2 months arguing and screaming at each other. I've seen far too much of that. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to focus on getting New York back to where it should be. So that's the, you know, when we have those two options, I'm going to choose the latter. We have a lot of work to do here. It's the greatest city in the world. I have every intention of keeping the men and women in this department focused on keeping it that way. We have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of obstacles for sure.
Right.
But I want to make sure that it remains the greatest city in the world, not just now, but generations to come. And
I know that this can become political, and you're not a politician, right? But would taking money away, federal money that New York City needs, would that hurt you and impact you even greater than it already has?
Yeah, of course. Taking any money away causes us, you know, to do things differently. And whether it's at a local level or certainly at a state level or at a federal level, we need that federal money. I think that everyone realizes this. We've been down this road a couple times in the past. Listen, we're still the #1 terrorist target in the world, I would argue. And, you know, we clearly need that money. I mean, on the anti-crime issue, Dan, we finished August with more gun arrests than we had last August. And that's with quite reduced manpower. Yesterday in New York City, 24 separate individuals arrested with a firearm. That's precision. Mm-hmm. That's evidence-based. Those anti-crime officers didn't disappear into the ether. They're out there working. They're working every day in New York City, redeployed, as well as our detectives and other units and cops all over the city. 24 gun arrests yesterday in New York City.
And I will get to
what I would challenge anyone in the media to do is do the real story on what happens when you're arrested with a gun in New York City. What are the consequences? And let's get to a safer place, because the communities deserve it. And quite frankly, they're starting to demand it.
Yeah.
We don't want to put dangerous people right back on the street.
We're certainly hearing about that as well. And I want to get to one more take on the president, because he said, I have offered to provide federal law enforcement assistance. Do you need or want that assistance?
Listen, I think I answered it. I'm going to stay above the fray, and I think that's where we should be.
Okay.
But we work with federal authorities on task forces every day throughout New York City, and they're tremendous partners.
Commissioner, you talked about some of those crime stats right there and those gun arrests, and those numbers are so important to highlight as well. Yeah. But there continues to be a lot of shootings in New York, right? Community leaders now calling on you and other leaders to address it as well. Take a listen, and I want to get your reaction.
We need leadership to step up so we can stop these guns on our street. If they don't start making some noise, their silence is deafening.
So in August,
on the heels of one of the most violent weekends we've had.
In August, Commissioner, I want to get your take here. The crime numbers that you guys just released said that there were 242 shootings in August of 2020, 91 in 2019 in the month of August. So it is a huge rise. So what are you doing to get these guns off the streets? You highlighted those arrests, and that is important. But what are the tactics here?
Yeah, well, it's just that. And it's the NYPD. It's prosecutors, it's many partners locally and federally, and most importantly, it's community. And I think we all have to come together at this time far. I would agree with Tony there. We need a lot of people to step up. We need voices. I can be accused of a lot of things, Dan. I don't think too many people would accuse me of being quiet lately, so I don't know who he was talking about there. But I agree. Everyone needs to step up and speak up here. And it's intolerable. People should not have to deal with worrying about gun violence in New York City now or ever. We have a lot of work to do. But again, one of the things that I just mentioned is 20. That's a large number.
Yes.
I mean, you shouldn't have to worry about that number. I'm telling you, that is a lot of gun arrests yesterday, and we're seeing it every day. We're seeing cops and detectives putting themselves in harm's way. We're seeing detectives building strong cases. We're working very closely with all 5 DAs and the Eastern and Southern District AUSAs. I mean, it's a full court press. We're doing the most we have with the resources that we have. And we need, everyone can be a part of this. You know, every single person watching your show right now, we need you to get involved. We need you to speak up. We need you to attend meetings. We need you, when you get that jury notice, to attend court and be a part of the process, because everything here helps. But it's going to take all of us. Dan, the biggest frustration, I'll tell you right now, I have is that revolving door of the criminal justice system.
Yeah, I know. We've spoken about that.
Putting these individuals right back on the street.
We have spoken about that time and time again here on this morning show here. I want to get your take on what critics are calling for an independent probe into the NYPD to determine if officers are staging a work slowdown. In fact, just moments ago, Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams was here on the morning show talking about it. So let me get your take on what he had to say.
But when you look at a substantial decrease in arrests, when you look at calls coming from civilians, and you're looking at police officers inside who are also concerned about some of their officers being slower in responding to jobs, if there is a slowdown, you're not only endangering the public, you're endangering your colleagues, and you're hurting the city of New York.
So, Commissioner, how do you explain the lower arrest numbers and an increase in response time?
Well, I mean, the first thing you have to do, Dan, is you have to remember that there's thousands of less officers on the street. So that's beyond a significant part of that argument. I would then remind everyone that we didn't have nearly months of ongoing protests, and there are still protests. We were attending protests last night in New York City that pulls officers away. And it's such a shame, because it's pulling officers away from the neighborhoods that need the police protection the most. Point 2. And let's talk about a slowdown in arrests. Perhaps it was the slowdown in marijuana arrests. No, that was legislated. Maybe it's a slowdown in knife arrests. No, that was legislated as well. And I could continue on and go on. How about turnstile jumpers or shoplifters or low-level drug arrests? Well, all of that was decisions made by many prosecutors that they did not want to prosecute those crimes. So this is where I say it is our city as New Yorkers. We need everyone to step up. And when I go out across this city, what I hear is thank you.
Right.
And I accept that thank you, but I know it's not for me. It's for the men and women of this department. They're asking us for more enforcement. They're thanking us for sending buy and bus teams out last week in the Bronx and this week in Manhattan to get drug dealers off the street. So, you know, to talk about a lower number of arrests when it's actually been orchestrated, I think is just it's really misleading the public.
You know, you're mentioning that thank you, and a big part of the conversation is, and we've talked about this before, you and I, is trust within the department, right? And transparency within the department. And you yourself have admitted that you had to work on those communication efforts along the way. And earlier this week, in fact, I want to highlight this, the department unveiled a new disciplinary system, codes really, that will be used. So just briefly explain how the rank and file are responding to this new disciplinary matrix that is really transparent for the public.
Yeah, and that's what it is. You know, that's a work in progress. We certainly briefed the unions. They have concerns. I respect those concerns. You know, it's not so much about, Dan, changing the penalties here, although that does happen at times. It was an examination of the entire process. You know, we had an independent panel come in of literally experts in the country a couple of years ago. I got to give Jimmy O'Neill credit.
Yeah.
And one of the things they said, and we linked to their report, it's on our website, you can read it. They said, our discipline process is overwhelmingly strong and fair. It's just that we're not transparent about it. And I agree 100% with that. So here is an attempt to level the playing field, make people aware of what penalties are, what they exist in the NYPD, what happens when somebody does something wrong and what they face.
Right, because you said that was always happening, right? It's just that the public didn't know it.
Well, listen, I got to be fair. It wasn't always happening. I think overwhelming amount of the time it was.
Yep.
But we always want to get better. I mean, we are an agency that looks inward and tries to do right and tries to reform. And we were doing that when nobody knew we were doing it, and that's a problem. This is one more attempt. It's an open period right now for the public to comment on it. My math is probably off, but there's probably about 4 weeks left in that. And then within 6 months, it'll be put into place. And I could tell you that on these serious cases, they come right to me, and I examine them with a panel. And sometimes I say, you know what, the penalty should be higher. Sometimes I go the opposite direction. But I always try to do what I think is right.
Commissioner Shea, I do want to get you off topic on something else if you'll allow it. I know you were a huge Mets fan, and the Amazons lost a big one last night. Tom Seaver, I just want to get your thoughts on his legacy. I know you're a big-time Met fan.
Well, I tell you, my father, God rest his soul, when he was alive, would bring me to Shea Stadium when no one was going to Shea Stadium. And he was one of the, obviously one of the main bright spots in those mid to late 70s. I remember when they got rid of him and couldn't understand it. And I remember I was there the day he came back. I'd go to see him pitch in person many times, just a true professional. The sport and the city lost, a real gem there. And, just a sad story.
Overall, hey, Commissioner, always appreciate you coming on here, being transparent, and always continuing these conversations. You're welcome back anytime, sir.
Thanks, Dan. Have
By
a
the
great
way,
day.
I got to say, real quick, great shot. You guys improved that camera shot there. You look great. Just got to say it.
If they can make me look good, it's amazing.
All right, Commissioner, thank you very much.